Call to order the Tuesday, June 5th informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council, and welcome all those who are here, council members and those in the audience, those on Channel 16 and siouxfalls.org. Welcome. We'll start this afternoon with a staff report from City Clerk Lori Hogstead.
Thank you. Our office, the City Clerk's office, is working on the project for the SIRE imaging program, and we're just beginning the project, getting some preliminary work done, sending some samples of different years of our records to the company that's going to be working with this project. We've sent a set of records from 1917, I believe it is, and around the 1950s, and then a current set of records, and that will help them put together their work statement and what will actually be incorporated into the scanning project. Denise Tucker, one of our assistant city clerks, is taking ownership and is the lead on this particular project. She's excited working on it, and we'll work on that as time permits, and things will get rolling here in probably the next month or two.
Good, thank you, Lori.
That's the end of my report.
Questions for Lori? I have one. Lori, would you remind us, we say the word SIRE all the time.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that people always remember what that is. Could you remind us, and then what is the scanning project going to involve?
Well, the scanning project, it will go on our SIRE system, which is the system whereby you can look to view the agendas, agenda items that might be on a particular meeting. And this system, it's going to be just great because it will allow you to do specific searches. For instance, you may know an ordinance that passed and maybe the date of the ordinance, but most often people do not know that. They know that maybe it was passed, say, in the 1980s. And in this case, rather than the way we would look now is we would just go through old records or old microfilm, try to narrow it down, try to find it. This system will have a text recognition, and so you'll be able to put in keywords. And yes, it may pull up 20 documents, but it will narrow it down as far as you wish to narrow it down by the key phrases that are put in, and will really make it easy for the citizens as well as other departments and our department to look up records from the city. And we are going to start with the current and work our way back, so it will take some time to get to the beginning of our records back in the 1890s, but it will get done.
Wow, that's really cool. Thank you, Lori. Any other questions for Lori Hogstead? Thank you. City Council open discussion. Councilor Karski.
Here recently, specifically today, there was an interesting article about dog bites, and being in the insurance industry, I see a lot of data on dog bites and how they affect our society, and I gave all of you some information I'd like to kind of share a little bit. It's a little bit dated, a few years old, but I don't think it's changed much. There are 3,000 injuries per day due to dog bites, 1,000 of which are seen in hospital emergency rooms, and more than half of these victims are children. And most are bitten in the face. Homeowners insurance pays losses in excess of $1 billion a year for dog bites, and there's a good number of them that aren't covered by insurance. The second little packet, and that one's stapled together for you. A study done over a 24-year period on the different dog bites by breed of animals, and two specific breeds stand out. Between the pit bull terriers, which account for 1,182 of the 2,200 dog bites, and the Rottweilers, which account for 430 of them, between those two, that's over 72% of those breeds account for the dog bites. 410 of the bites are to children. 410 to children and 110 deaths to children from pit bull bites. I've had two contacts from constituents in the last couple of months. One was a victim of a pit bull bite, required 4 surgeries, requiring about $60,000 in medical expenses, and he will lose some of the function in his hand from the pit bull bite. He was on a public sidewalk. And the other one is from a lady whose new neighbor who's building a house is going to do a pit bull rescue, who's very concerned about her own breeds of dogs. She has a couple small dogs in her yard, and the propensity for these breeds of dogs to attack. And we hear the stories about how it's not the dogs, it's the owners, but when you look at the actuarial statistics and the numbers, it really jumps out at you. And I would like this issue to be discussed and probably bring our animal control officers and anybody from the public who would be interested to one of our committees, possibly public services or land use, whichever one would be willing to take this on.
Questions for Councilor Karski? Councilor Anderson.
I guess I'm wondering where you want to go with this, as far as an ordinance to restrict or limit these animals, or exactly what direction would you want to try to go in this, Dean?
I guess that would be the extreme, maybe requiring a permit or a license even to have them, requiring that you carry insurance if you're going to have a breed of dog like this would, I think, be definitely a good start. Many communities have gone to the extreme of prohibiting these breeds of dogs, and I don't think we should rule that one out completely.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Councilor Karski? I am inclined to assign this to a committee, and I do think, Councilor Karski, that public service is the right place for that to go. I'm getting the look from Councilor Rolfing, though. What would you prefer, sir?
Well, either one would be fine. I'm just wondering if, with what we're in the middle of right now at land use, if it wouldn't be appropriate there too.
Yes, I had not put that together. That's a good idea. What do you think about that, Councilor Karski? Land use, and kind of tie it in with some of the animal conversations you're already having?
It seems that it would, especially if people, you know, the issue of breeding dogs and that type of thing could come up. So, you know, what are we using our property for, that type of thing. So I'd be comfortable with either one.
Okay. I think that's what we will do then. Hearing no other comments about it, we'll assign it to land use, get it onto your agenda when it's convenient in the next couple of months. I'll ask the clerks to add that to the agenda.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. Other open discussion, Councilor Entman.
Yes. I'd like to thank the councilors for their patience in me taking notes and forwarding notes from the leadership meeting. The chair set some pretty high standards here that are pretty hard to follow, especially for a person that has problem reading. But anyway, I'm just kidding. So thank you. I'm going to do better in getting the notes out to you. They did get out late this afternoon and amongst a couple of meetings that I did have. So I just thank you for your patience.
Good. Thank you, Councilor Entman. Councilor Jameson.
I just wanted to update us a little bit on an email that we all received at about 3 o'clock today from Cheryl Rath regarding item number 38 on tonight's agenda. Have you guys had a chance to see that? I just had a chance to talk to Craig Lloyd. He didn't realize it was the second reading, but I'm sure they'll be here tonight. I'm not sure what the delay is for removing the last little bits of that river ramp, but it is a good, it's pretty well gone, except a little bit. And I think they're going to be starting there pretty soon, based on our notes, but it actually may be even a little bit later. So somehow or another, we do really need to get confirmation that there's going to be equipment brought back in and taken out that remaining pillars or whatever it is before we enter into our agreement tonight. I think Craig Lloyd will be here to address that. If we need to get other information from Darren or others, but I think it's fair that we consider that ahead of time. That was the only reason for bringing it up.
Right. Thank you, Councilor Jameson. I think, too, that we'll have staff here in addition to Darren Smith that may know even a little bit more about it and will be able to bring us up to date on it. The report in the agenda meeting on Friday was that construction on the Hilton Garden Inn starts within the next couple of weeks, and so I'm thinking that the river ramp is going to be moving out of there very quickly. As you said, very little of it is left. But you're right. Those are questions to ask of staff this evening when we're on second reading. Other comments, questions about that particular item? Other open discussion. Councilor Staggers.
Yes. A number of people have been talking to me about how we're going to be spending the $4 million. And one of the issues that have been brought up is in regard to the almost $500,000 water feature. And a couple of people have said, well, you know, when we talk about a water feature, why should we spend $500,000 on a water feature when all you have to do is just walk a few blocks down to the falls? So there are some people who are kind of skeptical about, do we really need to spend $500,000 on a water feature?
Thank you. Comments or questions for Councilor Staggers? Thank you. Other open discussion, other counselors? I have a couple of things for you then regarding the 4th of July. Again, I'm hammering on this idea that council can be involved with the 4th of July parade. I think that Councilor Aguilar will be our sort of hostess for that day. We have little signs to put on whatever vehicle we end up in. Last year, we ended up in a trolley, and it's hard to see in and out of the trolley, so we may be looking for some other sort of vehicle. And I would also remind you that there has been a request go out today for volunteers. One of the most fun parts of the 4th of July is to volunteer and be in that food line and help people get to the free meal and those sorts of things. You meet lots of folks. It's a fun place to be on the 4th of July, so I'd invite you to be part of that. Councilor Karski.
I apologize for not addressing this earlier, not related to the 4th of July, but Fiscal Committee will be meeting right after this meeting. And item A on that list on our updates will be taken off. Mr. Bixler will be working with a few of the departments before he brings that to us, so he wanted a little bit more time to prepare. But prepare for an interesting Fiscal Committee meeting.
Good, thank you. And then regarding Inside Town Hall, which is our program that it appears on Channel 16 kind of a month at a time for each episode, our Legislative Operations Manager, Jim David, will be sending out the schedule of the days for those tapings for the next several months. If you haven't been on for a while, I would prefer that it be folks who have had a little time since their last appearance. And then I'd also encourage you to think of future topics so that you know that these air for a month. Think about budgeting, think about what's coming in the fall, those sorts of things. Then my question is for you, we kind of changed that format over the last year. Prior to the last several months, Inside Town Hall has actually been split in 15-minute segments for 2 different council members. Over the last several months, we have done it in a half-hour segment for one counselor to either split it up with a couple different people or however you want to manage it. Thoughts, comments about how that works? Preference for format? Do you want to go back to the 2:15s or do you want to stay with the 1:30? What's, Councilor Intiman?
We did also did a panel where there were 4 of us involved, right? I really like that format. We touched on a little bit of everything, gave everybody a chance to give some input.
Right, and the way that works, if I might, is since there are 8 of us, that takes 8 months out of the year if we stay with the half-hour format, and then that every quarter is has been a panel like that, and I've liked that too. I think that works out really well. It makes for great conversation. Other comments, thoughts? Yes, Councilor Aguilar.
And also, I've gotten real positive feedback as far as those roundtable discussions that we hold. I think that the half-an-hour format is a very positive move. I think it gives counselors the opportunity to really delve into either one topic or 2 topics, and I think it's worked really well.
Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads here. Consensus, what are we thinking over here? I know, Councilor Staggers, you haven't experienced that half-hour format yet, but...
No, whatever the preference of the council is fine with me.
We did find that some of us were running over each other's time, and so there's some value in that, and then we do get that opportunity for the roundtable. Hearing that then from the group, I'm going to ask Jim to go ahead and schedule that for half-hour time slots again, and we'll again schedule that. We must be close to doing that roundtable thing at some point here, so we'll make sure that that scheduling happens. So watch your email box for that and volunteer as it works in your schedule. Anything else in open discussion?
Council Chair?
Yes.
Could we go back to the 4th of July?
Yes.
I would be happy to be the point person on that, so if you would like to be in the parade and you want to ride rather than walk, please let me know. And then according to the press release that went out today, you can volunteer right online to work the picnic itself.
Good. Thank you for volunteering. I was going to appoint you to do that anyway. So, any other open discussion? All right. Let's move into our reports and updates. No, I've got the wrong agenda in front of me now. We're looking at presentations. The ordinance revision defining and establishing procedures for special events. Kelby Maris from Park Operations, the Park Operations Manager.
Good afternoon, City Council. Kelby Maris with Parks and Recreation. Excuse me. This ordinance revision that we're looking at involves special events, and the history on this topic is about a year ago, a little over a year ago, there was a group of people from police, Parks and Recreation, City Attorney's Office, the Health Department, Fire Rescue, that were all tasked with looking at our special events and seeing if there's a way that we could structure our process a little differently so that we could get a handle on our process. So a group of 4 of us, myself, Keith Allenstein with the City Attorney's Office, Regan Smith with Fire Rescue, and Lieutenant Galen Schmidt with the Police Department, were tasked then with going forward and doing some research and coming up with a proposal, ordinance change for how we would address special events in our community. And that is where we are today. And of course, I'm technologically challenged, so I'm just going to have to use the buttons. So in summary, special events in Sioux Falls, we host over 100 events in Sioux Falls annually. Events are small to large events of over 100,000 people. The majority of these events occur between May and October. And of course, most of those are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which of course is a time of week where city resources are kind of at the end of the week before we get started for the next week. And scheduling becomes an issue for a lot of city departments. And as you can see, virtually all of the city departments are involved in special events in one form or another. Some are involved a little more than others, just depending on the nature of the event. We used several cities in our comparisons when we started looking at different options for these special events. There we go. Lincoln, Nebraska, Sioux City. Some cities that were close to us, some of similar size, some that are larger and have more special events and larger events. Things in which we could look at. An interesting note is that it's very difficult when you're comparing these cities to compare apples to apples, because cities do things in so many different ways. The way we structure our special events currently and the way other cities do it seems similar up front with an application process, but then what's required of the event organizers after that can be very different. The first thing that we were after was consistency within our special events, whether they were held in the park system or on city streets, and also a definition of what actually is a special event. The Park Board has established a definition of a special event in the park system several years ago through policies and guidelines, and we're really just carrying that special event definition over into ordinance for events on city streets. Also, historically, Parks and Recreation has required an insurance certificate that names a city as additionally insured for these special events. That has not always been the case on events that have happened on city streets. We're just carrying that over to make that a requirement on any special event that happens on public property as well. Some considerations that we were built into this ordinance is things that would define as to why maybe a special event would not be allowed, things that may do unnecessary damage to the facilities, whether the park system or a city street, provides a timeline for the event organizers to submit their application. A smaller event would have to submit their application more than 30 days prior to their event, and larger events would have to submit their application more than 60 days prior to the event. And that simply is just giving staff and the event organizer enough time to make sure that all of the issues are handled, that everything is, that we've got all of our I's dotted and T's crossed, and every issue has been talked through, and that the event, when event day comes, that their event is successful. Another consideration in the ordinance is define some reasons why maybe an event would be shut down during the event. Whether the event gets out of hand, there's way too many people for the space, creates a public safety issue, things like that. Provides a fee structure, which I'll get into here in a little bit, for the size of the events. And it also allows the city to provide necessary equipment for events and then charge those events back for the use of that equipment. Things like barricades to close off city streets, or dumpsters in the event of a large event that is going to create a lot of trash and recycling for us. It allows the city then to go ahead and supply those items that the event organizer is responsible for, but then charge the event organizer those costs for the use of those items. The fee structure that I mentioned to a little while ago. This fee structure is an application fee that's based on the size of the event. Events under 500 people would be a $25 fee. Under 2,500 people would be a $100 fee. Under 10,000 people would be $250, and that would include all parades. And then events of 10,000 people or more then would be a $500 application fee. This fee is independent of all other fees that it could be charged to a special event. All those other fees are already established in ordinance. There's a concession fee through Parks and Recreation, depending on canopy size. There's a permit through fire rescue. There's health licensing. There's sound permits, other things, and all of these other things are independent of special events because those things can happen within our community outside of special events. The implementation, or plan of implementation for this new ordinance that it would start January 1st of 2013. Any event held on that day or after would then be subject to this new ordinance. And the revenue that this application fee is expected to generate is about $10,000 a year. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Kelby? Councilor Entman?
Kelby, can you tell me, you mentioned that there's an application process that they have to fill out, an application they have to fill out, and there are some needs. I know for some of us, we're used to making sure that we have insurance, and there's got to be a checkoff by a number of departments. How is compliance with that application checked? Can you just inform us a little bit on that, like the insurance and things? How do we verify that they have that?
The application is submitted to us, and we review the application before the event is scheduled. The insurance piece of it is that they don't receive any permits for their event until we have a certificate of insurance in hand that has been approved by the city's risk manager. Events that are happening this weekend, we just received insurance certificates this week, and that typically happens. Some of these events have that are large events have an annual insurance policy which comes due weeks before their event happens. So the insurance certificate is something that we do have in hand before the event happens.
Thank you.
Councilor Jameson?
Thank you. Kelby, do you know the numbers of people we're talking about, like for Hot Harley Nights, summer, or Hot Harley Nights and then the Corvette Nights or whatever that is? Do you have a number of people that are downtown for those events?
On our application, there's a location for them to put estimated attendance on there, and that's how we would do this piece of the ordinance. And it's historically been done on the application for park events. They do that, and if they say they're going to have 1,000 people there, and obviously there's more than 1,000 people, then the next year we can make that change. But it's really kind of an honor system on them for that. But right now there are 4 events that happen within the park system that would be in that top tier of events, would be over 10,000 people.
Okay, so you really do leave it up to the applicant to kind of, but you'll be there to guide them along if they're way out of order, you'd be able to.
Right. Yep. And we have had events that grow significantly during their planning process, and we can work with that too.
And then the open container allowance that I think happens on Hot Harley nights and the Corvette nights. How does that work where it's either decided that along that street or that time period you can have a drink and carry it around downtown, and to what stretch would you not be able to do that?
That I really don't have an answer to. We don't deal with the liquor licensing at all, or the special permits.
Okay.
That is part of our application, though, that if they do want to have alcohol at their event, who they're supposed to contact, and then they work through that process with the city attorney's office.
Well, the only reason I'm bringing it up is that if I had a get-together that was maybe going to have 1,000 people, so then I would have to go through the Jamie, I guess it would be now, and ask that I get an open container permit as part of that one-day or two-day event. I see. Okay.
Councilor Jameson, we actually have the former licensing
Oh,
specialist
do we
at
have
the
somebody
table.
here that knows anything?
She would be willing to help you with that.
Great.
As far as the downtown events with alcohol, generally what happens, and I'll just use an example of hot summer nights. Downtown Sioux Falls applies for a special one-day permit for beer and wine only, not liquor. Beer and wine only, and it would cover the event area. In fact, they'll usually say, Phillips Avenue from 13th to 9th Streets, et cetera. So it would cover the entire area. And individuals are allowed then to purchase the beer and or wine from the designated stands and walk with it throughout that area. What they cannot do is they cannot go into a business, for instance, and stop in, just to use one for an example, into Minerva's and buy a mixed drink or any type of liquor, really any type of alcohol, and then walk with it outside the premises and go onto the sidewalk. And that is an issue we have had in the past. And we do notify the downtown businesses prior to these summer events taking place that, it's fine if they sell their drinks and they can have them on their patio areas, but individuals are not allowed to take that alcohol out into the street. They can only use the beer and wine that's through the permit process.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate that. Does that answer the alcohol questions?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Jameson. Councilor Anderson is next.
Kelby, give us the history of the Special Events Committee as far as where this started and, why it's now moved into basically being a city committee.
Well, the committee was established several years ago. About 10 years ago, I believe, is when it was finally established. And it's representatives from the departments that I had mentioned before, and it's basically so that we can all get around the table with an event organizer and discuss their event to make sure that all of their questions are answered, that they understand all the rules that they have to abide by, and that if there's anything else in the event as they talk and think of something else, we can help guide them through the process. It has come into a whole city thing because there's basically two committees. One that works with downtown events with downtown Sioux Falls, and it's the same people that are sitting on the committee that sit on the committee in Parks and Recreation. And adding not only downtown events, but other events that may happen, road races throughout the city, is another perfect example of things that would happen on public property. And depending on what they have at their event, what they're going to do, it depends on exactly who all needs to be at the table and help make that event successful.
Okay, and if I can continue.
Yes, one more.
Okay, if someone wants to put together an event now, we have a one-stop shop where they can put in their application, and then this all goes through the rest of the committee? Or do they have to continually go to the different departments and ask for permits?
No, the application we have currently is for events that happen within the park system, and we get all of the, like I said, we get all of the different departments around the table. However, if they want different permits for different things, they do have to, if somebody needs a sound permit, they need to visit the health department to get their sound permit. If they've got a canopy permit through the fire department, they've got to get that from fire rescue. If it's permits through Parks and Recreation, they have to come to us and get it. At that meeting, we really talk a lot about the permits that they're gonna need, and then those permits then are are made after that. And then again, those permits aren't handed out until we've got their insurance certificate. So there is still a little bit of legwork on their end to make sure that they touch all of their bases and get to all those city departments that they need to get to, because it inevitably will go to have an event meeting, and the vendor list for whichever event hasn't been finalized yet because they're still getting vendor applications for their event. So it gets a little, the meeting is not the place to hand out the permits just because the event's not finalized yet. And then if we have that meeting too close to the event, then there's going to be some time constraints for us to not be able to meet their needs sometimes.
Okay, so if I apply for an event, and who tells me what departments I have to go to?
Well, through that application, if there's things on there that will direct you toward other departments. The beer and wine is a good example. When we get to, health department is a good example as well. When we get to that meeting, though, the only other permit that seems to come up are either pyrotechnic permits or the large canopy permit, which comes from the fire department, and then they're given that kind of information at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Rolfing.
Thank you. First of all, I've worked with you guys, as you know, a lot of police and fire and parks and rec and everybody like that on these kind of events, and you do a wonderful job, so thank you. And I know that you needed to do this, but I've also been asked a couple of questions by some people, but first question I wanted to ask you is, where does the $10,000 go? Does that go to the council budget? No?
I believe it's being budgeted $5,000 in Parks and Recreation and $5,000 in police as revenue.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure where that was going to go. So, secondly, is this going to affect any of the other fees that they pay for the concessions, for the, you know, for all those kind of things? Is this going to be start at the top and then, you know, escalate down and start raising all the other fees that people have? Because that's a concern that some people have had with me, especially for nonprofits. These people are, you know, almost, I shouldn't say almost, but a lot of these people that are doing these events, Jim, you do some, but it's really a nonprofit situation that you're doing it for. Most of these events like that, the money goes to a nonprofit, you know, Children's Miracle Network or whatever. And what we're trying to do here is say, hey, we'd like to cover our costs of putting out these things, and that's something that we probably should do. We want to make sure that this doesn't trickle down and all of a sudden we've got every other fee being raised along the way too.
This application fee is mostly in an effort to get some buy-in from the event organizer from the beginning. Like I said before, it's completely independent of all the other fees, because those fees are in ordinance for various reasons, right, and are independent of special events. So this would be an additional fee to the event organizers. We are not by any stretch trying to limit the number of events in Sioux Falls. We know the community likes the events, and the $10,000 in revenue that this is going to generate is not going to come anywhere close to covering the costs that the city incurs for these events.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Staggers.
Yes, I have a few questions. The first one is in regard to the purpose of this ordinance. The purpose is to regulate public space, and public space includes city parks, streets, or property. Just to clarify, we're talking about outside public space, not inside public space? Is that right? Okay. Secondly, the insurance requirements. The insurance requirements is going to be required for all of the special events.
Yes.
There's one special event I'm looking at here, and that is political rallies or speeches. So if a politician gets out on the front steps of the town hall here, they're going to have insurance coverage when they give their speech.
No, political rallies are, political rallies are part of this. Yes, organized Well, I guess I don't know
Or
if
under special event?
I may have to defer to Keith on that one. But if there is going to be a political rally in a city park where they're going to reserve a space and have a political rally, then it is a special event. We do need insurance. As far as somebody showing up and giving a speech on the front steps of City Hall, I don't see that as being one of the things that we would reserve space for and usually are not contacted about.
But I don't see that in the ordinance, proposed ordinance. It seems like political speech.
There's a spontaneous event is still listed in the ordinance. A spontaneous event is something that's unplanned or unannounced. And it's not defined as a special event. But we have in the past had political candidates for office that would reserve a picnic shelter and have a cookout and give away food and all that kind of stuff. And yes, at that point, it's a special event and we require insurance of them.
I guess I would prefer to have, greater clarification in this proposed ordinance, because to me it still seems very clear that political rallies or speeches are special events, and special events organizers are going to have this insurance. And that being the case, I'm also concerned about other free speech issues too, not just political rallies per se, but other events that really might be quite small in scope, but we're going to require all this insurance. This seems to be a little excessive. Can you comment on that?
Well, there are other pieces in this ordinance about assemblies and block parties and outdoor weddings, which are not special events. And assemblies in this ordinance already says they're a group of 25 or more persons.
I think it's 10, isn't it? 10 or more? It's an assembly?
It's 25. You may actually have an older copy of this that we were working from that was incorrect, but the actual number was changed in 2003 to 25 persons for an assembly instead of 10.
But this says 10. I just got it today.
Yeah, I can give you a new copy of that. That was
okay.
changed late last week. We inadvertently were using a piece of ordinance that didn't reflect all of the 2003 changes to Chapter 38, which in 2003 that change was made from 10 persons to 25.
I know outside the downtown area it's 25. So in the downtown area it's 25
right.
now?
In the downtown area, yeah, in the loop area it's still 10 people.
Isn't it?
Yep. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Clarification from the chair. Where are you in the ordinance, Councilor Staggers, when you're talking about the 10 and 25?
Oh, the 10 is on section 38-133, the
Thank you.
first page, under definitions. You can see down there, assembly means any block party, outdoor wedding, church service, demonstration, rally, gathering, or group of 10 or more persons.
Good, thank you, sir. Just for reference then, Kelby, that is what's on SIRE. That's what the public is seeing as well, as 10 or more. Further questions from Councilor Staggers? Are you
I guess I just
done?
have the cost. Right now, what is the cost to get a permit?
Right now there is no cost.
Okay. I'm just wondering here why we actually have to start charging now. I mean, we have some paperwork being shuffled around, but it doesn't seem like it's excessive.
Right.
You would have to charge people for this.
The special event committee that gets together is made up of 8 city employees that spend a few hours about every week through the months of May and June to go through all these special event applications and meet with the organizers. And that's part of what this fee is. But then there's other costs that the city incurs the day of the event that are not being captured by the application fee. There's, in city parks, there's things like sanitation, there's on-site meetings with the event organizers so that we can mark utilities for when they set up all of their canopies, and inspections from building services and from fire rescue and the health department when they get their event set up. Police, the day of the event, whether it's for one of the road races we have, an event in the park system, or a parade. And so there's other costs that the city is incurring supporting these special events that, like I said before, we're not trying to do any cost recovery here. We're trying to get some more buy-in from some of these event organizers so that on the front end, we've got their commitment to this as well.
Because we do have other costs involved. I have in front of me here, the vendor fee is $50 to start off with. And whether it's for profit or nonprofit. Also, my understanding too is that these vendors, they also pay for picking up the garbage by the city and so forth. So in other words, what I'm saying is I think we already have a lot of other fees involved for these people. And now we're adding something else. And I'm just wondering if it's really necessary.
Okay, I'm ready for round 2 on questions. I have not heard from Councilor Karski or Councilor Aguilar. Either one of you have questions at this point. Councilor Karski.
I guess since Councilor Staggers brought it up on the political rallies or speeches, I can understand where a rally should require a permit, but when you talk about speeches, it seems like we may be violating some constitutional rights by having to charge for them. And if we're talking just a political speech, something on the steps of the Carnegie or another public building, to require a permit for that type of thing when it might last 15 to 20 minutes seems a little bit burdensome to require that type of a thing. So I would agree with Councilor Staggers on that requirement.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Entman.
Thank you. As a lot of people know, I put on a fairly large event in downtown Sioux Falls. And I'm here to share with you the information that the committee that we have to go before is excellent, because it answers all the questions that we have when we put on these events and leads little to be guessed or leaves little to the imagination, because they're very specific. When we put on major events like this, whether it's a charitable event or whatever, the whole purpose of doing something like this is, yes, to raise funds, but also we want to make sure that the people that are attending our events are safe, that we're providing the best services possible to make this a very good experience for them. And I think that that's key in what we're doing. And yes, we do use significant resources. We have stress on police, we have stress on fire rescue, street department, putting out barricades, helping with those kinds of things. We get the small event that we do, we have over 450 volunteers that we get, from National Guard troops to just people that are out there helping us. The area that we do our events in is defined as far as the beer license and wine license that we have. And I might add that that is very important to us, because that is a significant amount of dollars that we raise comes from that. Now, I do have food vendors, I do restrict other vendors, but I'm here to tell you that if you're a retailer in a restaurant or a retailer out there, the only reason you're going to these events, or one of the main reasons you're going to these events, is because you're going to make money. The bottom line is you got to make money, and it's my opinion that if you're going to make money in a situation like this, it's a great event, but you also have to pay to play. I mean, if you're out there putting stresses, we do not pay for garbage. However, the City Parks Department provides a dumpster for us, and they provide staff that pick up the dumpsters that are there. The vendors are responsible for their garbage at their location. We provide the dumpster for it. However, we need additional space or dumpsters for garbage and whatever, and we make sure that we pay for that. The fees that we have, that you have set up there, I think when you asked a number of us from events to come in and give some input into your proposals, you originally had a higher fee structure recommended, and we shook our head on that, and across the board we all said, we're not sure that we agree with that fee structure, especially for new events. And I bring approximately 30,000 people downtown, and I'm here to tell you the biggest issue that we have sometimes is that within the event space that we have, our restricted event, we take care of all of that with signage about not taking beer off the premises and everything. But we have people that come into our facility, into the grounds for our festival, that are bringing in stuff from other establishments throughout the downtown area and all that stuff. And we're responsible, and we actually go out and we clean the city streets the day following the event. I have staff that go out and we pick up cans and everything up and down Main and Phillips Avenue. So quite honestly, I believe that the fee structure that you're proposing is not restrictive. I think that it makes sense from a usage standpoint. Those that are playing are paying. There might be one area, for example, Councilor Staggers, that I might have some issues with, and that's the Multicultural Center and the event that they put on down there, where they have a cultural event where people from the community are displaying some wares or trying to sell some wares. But that's something I believe that the Multicultural Center needs to work out. If the fees for attending these events goes up because the organizers raise those fees to recoup those costs, that's the free market system that's out there. But I do believe that our parks that we have, we do need to protect the integrity of the parks. For example, they tell us we have to put plywood down so that we don't kill the grass underneath some of our refreshment tents. And we comply with all of that. And the businesses in the community are more than happy to participate and help with donations and different things along those different lines. I think the organizers that are out there for these major events do a very good job of putting it together. And I commend the city for your efforts here. I do agree the political thing, Councilor Staggers, if it is a free speech issue and you're saying, if you stand up and make a speech and there's more than 10 of your buddies there listening to you, I might have a problem with that too. But I'm not sure that's the intent of this particular ordinance.
Thank you, Councilor Intiman. Councilor Jameson, you had your hand up for one more question, and then we're running long, so I'm going to wrap us up.
The question comes with, how many events are held on the parks of this 100 events? Maybe you said it. How many were?
Last year, I believe we had 52 events.
52. And what I was thinking of is what I think Councilor Anderson is hinting at is that I think he's been chewing on my ear for a couple of years now about this, on how we should centralize this effort in some effect. And I think he's chewing on Karski's ear now. So I think it makes good sense, and I don't know if you're the right group to do it or if somebody is, but have you thought about that as far as centralizing, if you're going to have a special event in town, in the city limits, here's where you go to apply, and from there they'll walk you through the process? I've never done one myself, so I'm...
Yeah, we've thought about that, and we've talked about it, and really there's two places where people have these events. It's either in the park system or city streets. So they either come to us or they come to the police department. We have talked about having one person do that, but then the question becomes, who is that person and who's going to take on all of the events and take it from there? Because as we get into the event, the group of people is the same that are going to be involved in it. There's the same representatives from the same city departments are all involved. So as we've talked about how we would implement this, it is any event that would happen in the park system, the application would come to Parks and Recreation, and anything that happens on city streets would then go to the police department, and then that would be their primary point of contact from that point.
So really what you do is you defer them. If they call you and say they call the Parks Department and want to do something on the streets, you would tell them you really need to go to the street department. Right. Is that how?
There's a lot of events that come to the Parks and Recreation, and they want to do a road race. I'll get all the particulars of the event. I'll share that with the police department, and the police department then will make that contact once we know that they're not using park property for that event.
Gotcha.
So
okay, thank you.
Okay, good conversation. This is scheduled for a first reading. It's item 39 tonight. And then if we decide to set a hearing, it's scheduled to be Tuesday, June 12th for the second reading. If there are changes that are going to happen, those conversations need to go on. But you need to remember that this did come through Public Service Committee as well. So it's had some airing. Don.
I have one thing that may help with the political rallies piece. Keith Allenstein with City Attorney's Office was on this committee, and he points out at the top of page 2 of the ordinance, it says special event shall mean any of the following activities taking place on public space that involves a temporary and, he circled, exclusive use of public space, or any substantial deviation from current legal land use or legal non-conforming use, and then he circled and shall include but not be limited to. So as long as you don't need exclusive use of that space, people can come and go. That wouldn't be considered a special event according to Keith's interpretation. So hopefully that helps, and I may clear that up so that if you wanted to have an impromptu speech or whatever it might be, you could do that as long as you didn't restrict other people from using that same space.
Well, then, if I might, Mr. Carney, if my family reunion is scheduled for the Spellerberg Picnic Shelter and there will be 75 people there, do I need $1 million in insurance coverage to have that event there?
You do not.
Because I'm only using the picnic shelter and it is only, I'm not exclusive any sort of area in that park, is that correct?
Yeah, you're reserving just the shelter itself.
Right, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on what exclusive use is. I mean, like Jim has an event downtown on Phillips. Well, he's not using all of Phillips exclusively or whatever. I mean, so.
Mr. Kearney, do
yeah,
you want to answer that? It has specific boundaries, is that not correct?
Yeah.
When Councilor Intiman has an event there, there are specific boundaries in the agreement, is that correct?
Yeah, when that event is scheduled, specific boundaries are required. To Lori's point about the area where malt beverages can be, is specifically called out on where he has use, and people from the event can be in the streets, but they cannot leave that specific area. So that would be exclusive use of that area for his event.
I guess I can understand that, but if I'm going to give a speech out on the front here of the town hall, that's going to be exclusive space for when I'm there. I don't want anybody else taking over that space.
Well, as the ordinance is written, if you want to reserve that space and not allow anybody else to use that same space, then that would be a special event. But if you want to just go there and use it without restriction for people to come in and go, to pay their utility bill, whatever it might be, then that's not considered a special event as this is defined.
Okay. Lori had clarification for us.
I just wanted to address the ordinance, the different ordinance that Councilmember Staggers had seen on the informational. There was a little bit of confusion with this ordinance because the draft, the changes that were actually made to a previous version of the ordinance. And I believe Keith Allenstein discovered that a version that was adopted in 2003 had never been sent to coding. So the changes were made to a version prior to that. They did scramble and get that updated in time for Monday to place on the agenda for tonight for first reading. So I assure you the one tonight, in fact, I looked while we were sitting here, for first reading is a correct copy. My apologies, Kelby, I did not change it on the informational. So it is correct, though, for first reading tonight.
Good. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate that clarification. It is the version that's on the 7 o'clock meeting agenda is correct. Councilor Anderson.
Just quickly to continue on something that Councilman Jamison brought up, as far as who to go to one-stop shop, I think that what the police and our Parks Department has done has consolidated this process, and it's in the right direction. I would still like to see some more consolidation, and an ideal that Councilman Karski came up with is maybe taking a look at our licensing clerk and making that the central location to where these are applied for. And then that's, okay, and that licensing clerk could then direct the applicant on what they would need to do and maybe even provide that support and make sure that emails are sent out to the appropriate people that are on the committee so that they are aware of that event also. So it's something we can talk about more and maybe in public services, but I feel that this is a good start to consolidating that process, and I think we should move forward with it.
Good. Thank you, Kelby. We appreciate your input. We appreciate your detailed report. Reminding you that it is a first reading tonight, so if you want that second reading to be a different date, we need to be changing that, so keep that in mind. It's item 39 tonight. Anything else for the good of the order? This meeting took way longer than I expected. Good conversation. I'm going to adjourn this meeting.